Hi, I'm Amanda Nicole, and I have some plant medicine for you. So, this weekend, March 26th, 27th of 2021, there's going to be a full moon, and I believe it's in Libra. And I do like to keep up with what's happening in the sky. I do like to pay attention to the planets, to the stars. I'm very interested in astrology, and a couple of years ago, maybe more, took a class through nightlight astrology, traditional astrology classes, horary classes, because I read a quote by Paracelsus where he said, "If you don't know the planets, you don't know the plants." And so a voice inside of me said, "Get thee to the planets." And so thankfully at the time, my teacher, Ashley Lateki Ellenboss, her partner, her husband, is an astrologer and a teacher, and he has a lovely YouTube channel. I'll put a link below so that you can find him and find her. She also has a lovely channel. And so I began taking the classes, and it was just breathtaking. I would finish these 3 hour long classes on, I believe it was Monday evenings, and I would often sit and cry. It's just the beauty of how our stories are written in the stars and by the divine hand. And so it's very lovely to me. So I pay attention. I read, I listen, and I see what medicine is there for me in the stars, what wisdom is there for me, what counsel, what divine message is being spoken. We think of the book of nature, another way to hear the voice of the divine. So, one of the things that I read about this weekend coming up was that I should pay attention myself. I'm an Aquarius rising, Leo sun, Pisces moon. I should pay attention to what I was reading, studying, writing, teaching, what was happening in my life in a spiritual way 8 years ago, 2013. Pay attention. And I thought, oh my goodness, well, that was quite a year. I'm sort of getting teary eyed even thinking about it. So that year, I was with Teresa Boardwine from Green Comfort School of Herbal Medicine. I'll put a link for her below also. She's just incredibly lovely and was my first herbal teacher. And with her, I was enjoying a class taught by Matthew Wood, another one of my teachers, my first teachers. And I'll put a link for him below also. A wonderful author, person, and I had immersed myself in this program, and I was spending at that time, I believe it was 1 week in a month for 6 months, 9 months, I can't recall, in a yurt with Matthew Wood and Teresa and 20 some odd other women who were interested in plant medicine, studying the plants, listening to the plants. And in those months, my life was being transformed. I remember my first class in that year before Matthew Wood came with his series when I was with Teresa. The very first class, I came into the yurt. Everyone was getting their tea, getting situated, saying hi to each other. I didn't know anyone there at the time, just Teresa. But I came in and I sat down on one of the couches, and class hadn't even started. And I got teary-eyed because I knew I had found my people. I had found my place. I knew it. Before that, I had been a midwifery student, attending births, hosting my community's birth circle for several years at the time, and was tired. I tended to end up attending births that were difficult and required an enormous amount of energy and adrenaline in ways that what we call butter births didn't. So I remember saying to someone, I'm tired of people. I want to go hang out with the plants. And I was blessed with this class that was maybe 20, 30 minutes from me, tucked away in the mountains. So I went and knew that things were changing. I felt myself waking up. I felt myself remembering. And I had my own healing to do at the time. I had just come through a season where I had experienced 7 consecutive miscarriages after 3 healthy pregnancies with easy births, relatively speaking. I probably shouldn't have called them easy, but they didn't require surgical intervention and that sort of thing. So, but I hadn't been well. And so I was moving through my own season of healing. Thankfully, at that time when I took the classes, the season of miscarriages were over. I had had, at that time, 2 more healthy pregnancies and little ones come into the world. So, the plant medicine. What does all this have to do with the plant? So, when I heard pay attention to 2013 and what you were doing and what you were studying 8 years ago, where you were, that's where I was. I was in a yurt with Teresa and Matt and 20 some other women, including Ashley, who I mentioned earlier. And I was beginning my journey with the plants in a more formal, intentional way. And so the phrase I heard in my mind when I thought back to 2013, and the person who wrote this report, I think it was Channy Nichols, I believe, was pay attention to what was happening at that time 8 years ago, because it's going to shape the next 8 years. You know, it's not leaving. You've been in this place, walking this, well, she didn't say walking this path. That's what I was thinking. And now what you've discovered, what you've seen, is going to take you forward. And so the phrase that came into my mind was, well, what I've been doing for the last 8 years is walking my path. That's what I've been doing. And immediately, I just got chills. Lady Slipper came to mind, because 8 years ago in 2013 was when I met Lady Slipper, which is a beautiful, just exquisite spring ephemeral that last year here in the upstate of South Carolina, the little Lady Slipper that I have here in my elemental sanctuary was gifted to me, the Lady Slipper, by a friend and a student, bloomed right around May Day, right around Beltane. So we will see what happens this year. We're getting close to that time. And so it was 2013, 8 years ago, that I met Lady Slipper. I was taking this class with Matt. I was with this group of women, and I started to see Lady Slipper everywhere. Not in person. It wasn't time yet. It was still winter, the first part of the year. But I was seeing it on postcards and the covers of magazines and artwork. And you know how it is, those of you who have already begun to have the plants be a part of your world, they start calling to you and you start seeing them everywhere, and they're trying to get your attention. And at the time, I didn't know her medicine. I just knew she was beautiful. I didn't know how rare she was or how precious she was, but I knew she was calling to me. So, the last class of that session with Matthew Wood, I was sitting with him and I was talking to him about myself, herbalism. I had questions for him, and I can't recall exactly what sentence I used, but I said something along the lines that I wasn't sure I should call myself an herbalist, that felt like too big of a title. And I said, it just feels presumptuous. And before I even got the whole word presumptuous out of my mouth, Matt chimed in and said, with this very definitive tone, well, you're going to have to get over that. And it sort of startled me a little bit. I was a little taken aback by it. But it's something that I've never forgotten, and he was absolutely right. I had to get over that. So, Lady Slipper medicine. We'll start there. Lady Slipper helps us walk our path. It's a slipper, a moccasin. That's its other name, moccasin flower. It's a shoe when you look at it, and you can slip your feet right in. So, for walking your path. This is not always easy. Sometimes we don't even know what our path is, and sometimes when our path presents itself, we think, well, it's going to too great a place, or it's too treacherous, it's too dangerous, or I don't know the way. And there's all sorts of things we can say where we are feeling and thinking, I can't do this. I can't walk this path. And for me, it came as, I'm not big enough. So the way that I would experience it is Lady Slipper was like my mom's shoes when I was little, and I would pretend, and I would slip into my mom's high heel shoes, and there'd be about an inch or so on the edge of it on the back, and I would clomp around the house and wasn't terribly graceful, and but was practicing, but I didn't quite yet fit what I considered these grown-up shoes, these big shoes. And so this is how I've experienced Lady Slipper. This is how I was experiencing being presumptuous. Those shoes don't fit me. I'm not big enough. That's what I was experiencing. And so over the last 8 years, I have had to energetically and even spiritually, emotionally, mentally, probably physically, all the ways, um, grow into these shoes. Maybe they were always my shoes, right? But I had to feel like they fit. I had to be ready to slip them on. And it's so curious now because here I am 8 years later, and calling myself an herbalist doesn't seem like it's big enough. So it's this whole transition from I can't call myself an herbalist, that's too big of a title, to now here I am 8 years later thinking that title doesn't cover who I am. It's not wide enough. It's not big enough. So I've gone from feeling I wasn't big enough for a word or a title to feeling like that word or title isn't big enough for me. This is a huge shift, a huge transition, and there's no doubt in my mind that Lady Slipper is a part of that. Walk your path. I have to tell you this story about Lady Slipper. I was taking an herbal foundations class, an herbal apprenticeship class with Ashley Lateke Ellenboss, who I mentioned earlier with Sky House Herbs. And she did a meditation, a journey at the beginning of one of the classes. And in it, Lady Slipper came to me. But first, Lady's Mantle came to me. And Lady's Mantle had on this beautiful, sparkling, diamond bejeweled, pearl dew dress. She hurries me through the forest wanting to show me something. I'm a little girl, and we come to the foot of this tree, and there are slippers sitting there. And they're Lady Slipper. I know it. It's like a gift from Lady Slipper. And here, put these shoes on. And I said to Lady Slipper and to Lady's Mantle, I'm not big enough. Those shoes don't fit. And Lady Slipper simply said, well, whenever you're ready, they'll be here waiting for you. And then Lady Mantle and I ran back through the forest, back to the bear that was in the cave, and that part of the journey was over. But that's exactly what happened, because when it's meant for you, it's meant for you. When it's your shoe, it's your shoe. So I'll give an example that Matt offered about Lady Slipper, which was this idea of Cinderella. So for Cinderella, we all know the story. She has the glass slippers. She goes to the ball. One of them's left behind. She goes back after the ball to being this slave, this servant, tending the cinders around the fire, being abused and unappreciated by her family. And then when the time comes for who she is to be revealed, and for her to move out of one phase of her life into the next phase of her life and actually step into who she truly and really is, then at that moment, the foot is slipped on her foot. Everyone sees that the shoe fits, and everything changes, because now she is able to not be hidden, but to embody her true self. So the shoe was always hers. She was always her true self. But when it's time, that revelation comes. When it's time, there's the revealing. So this is another lovely aspect of Lady Slipper. There is an article that is shared by, I believe it's Chestnut School of Herbs, on Lady Slipper, and Asia Suler also shares. Oh, well, hers is a little different, her article, but I'll put links for both below. But Chestnut School of Herbs, what it shares in its article about Lady Slipper is how long it can take for Lady Slipper to bloom, to come up from the earth and be seen, and how necessary it is for Lady Slipper to have just this perfect setup of nutrients and whatnot in its environment so that it can bloom. And so I believe in the article it states that it can take like 20-25 years for a lady slipper to decide to show herself, to come up and to bloom. So if you are out in nature, in the wild, in the forest, and you come across a lady slipper, you're able to experience that delight and be offered that gift. Just consider all that had to come together for that plant to be in that place for you to see her, and how long it may have taken her to decide to lift herself up out of the ground and show herself, reveal herself to you. So this is another very lovely aspect of Lady Slipper, which is it's okay if it takes time. It's okay if you're what's considered a late bloomer. I don't know how old some of you are that are watching, but I am a little older. I am 41. And so for some of us that are older, we might look around and we might see an 18-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 24-year-old, a 30-year-old, and it looks like, it seems like, and maybe it's so, that they've got their ducks in a row, they've found their path, they're manifesting it, they're embodying it, and there they are. And here we are like doing this, all over the map, and it's like, what am I doing? Where am I going? Why is this taking me so long? Why didn't I have this figured out, years ago, decades ago? And it's so lovely because Lady Slipper, like mullein, is a plant for what the world would consider late bloomers. For people who take more time in blooming, in showing themselves, in revealing themselves. And part of the reason for that is there's a lot happening under the soil. There's a lot that's needed and necessary for it to be the perfect environment for that blooming, for that revelation. So the fact that it's been 8 years since I met Lady Slipper and had that conversation with Matt, to this point where life is shifting, life is changing with the work that I do with the plants. The fact that it's taken that time shouldn't be surprising in some ways at all. And I do think that Lady Slipper is one of those plants that teaches us to appreciate the process and teaches us patience, and also shows us that the end result is completely worth it. I was telling some students in class the other day, the fact that it might take 20 some years for a Lady Slipper to show up is completely worth it. Because when you see her in the forest, when she lets you glimpse her out in the wild, she's so completely worth it. I mean, it's just like a gem, a jewel, a hidden treasure. I mean, you see her, and this is how I feel about her. It could have taken her hundreds of years to get there. She's so worth it. She's so beautiful. She's so rare. She's so precious. And so this is something to think about, something to consider, that it will be worth the wait. That's part of Lady Slipper's medicine. It will be worth the wait, and the end result will be even better than you expected. So another part of Lady Slipper's medicine that can tie into that is, when I say it's worth the wait, it reminds me of when women have babies, when they give birth. So you have 9 months that you have this little one in your womb growing and becoming. Before that, you may have had years of waiting if it was difficult for you to conceive a child. Then you go into the birthing process, and it may not be over in an hour. It may be an extended time where you're opening yourself to being this channel for this being to come into the world. And then the moment when you hold this little baby it was worth it. The journey was worth it. The waiting was worth it. The path was worth it. It was all worth it when you hold this little one. So this is another aspect of Lady Slipper medicine, is that it does have this connection to women, the reproductive system, to birth, to sexuality. If you look at a lady slipper, it's so obviously sensual, obviously sexual. So we will say it looks like a shoe, but it can also look like a woman's sacred space, a yoni. It can look like a man and the testes and these parts. I mean, this is lady slipper is sensual, um, intimate places and parts of us as humans manifesting into the world, sort of, mm, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like on display, for us to see, to enjoy, and to appreciate. So, one of the things that can often happen along our path, where at the end we'll say it was worth it, is not only the length or the duration, but the difficulties along the way. So one of the medicines of Lady Slipper is you can feel it. You can feel it. So when I first received this message from Lady Slipper, I was just moments away from giving birth to my sixth child, a little girl. And this was going to be the first birth that I was going to open up in, and do so with the consciousness of the sexual abuse and trauma that I experienced as a child. And then, as a lot of you know, as women, as you go through life, many other moments along the way. So I was a little worried. I was concerned because in my previous birth, when I had given birth, I could feel what they call the contractions. Not my favorite word, but I could feel those, with my uterus, my abdomen. But when the baby began to enter the world and move through the birth canal, I never felt anything. Never. So people will talk about, ring of fire and stretching, and it was a beautiful, lovely picture that I heard one midwife tell, where she was giving birth to one of her children, and as her little one was moving through and into the world, she could feel its little hand up against its face, like moving, through her. I thought that's so beautiful, but I never felt those things. And so I was concerned, how will I respond now that I'm awake? How will I respond now that I'm conscious? I wanted the birth to be peaceful and I wanted it to be beautiful, but I was concerned, how will I react? How will I respond? And so I was walking and I came across Lady Slipper, and she said to me so clearly, you can feel it. You can. Like, don't be afraid. You can feel it. And I did. I did feel it. And I was able to handle it. And it was beautiful. And my daughter did come into the world. And this is such a lovely part of Lady Slipper medicine for those of us who have experienced trauma. And it can come in so many forms. So for some of us, it can be sexual abuse or sexual trauma, where we think of another human touching us in ways that we don't want. But it can also come, like for me, when you're giving birth. They can be violent when you're giving birth. They're cutting you with episiotomies and these sorts of things. It's really difficult. So what happens is, literally your nervous system, for the perineum, the pelvic floor, it just shuts off. It just shuts down. It's damaged and it's overwhelmed, and this is scary. And Lady Slipper was traditionally used, its root, which we don't use now because of wanting to care for it and tend it. Now we use the flower essence. But traditionally it was used for a nervine tonic for the reproductive system, for these nerve endings for the body, so that they could wake up and be healed again. And so part of the medicine of Lady Slipper is also you can feel the intensity of it. You can feel it. So for some people who have experienced trauma, when they're with their partner and they're being intimate, even the pleasure, even the pleasantness of sexual touch can be too much. It can be overwhelming. It can be too intense. And so there's a shutdown. And so what Lady Slipper helps to do is to wake up. You can feel it. It's not overwhelming. It's not too intense. You can feel it. But when we move and shift to the larger picture of our path, of walking our path, what she's also telling us is you can feel it. You can feel all the feelings that come with walking your path, and they're going to be intense. This has been true for me over the last 8 years. There are going to be moments of just ecstasy, and there are going to be moments that are euphoric as you enjoy your family, enjoy your friends, as you connect to the plants, as you have these spiritual moments or experience these insights or these moments of connection or communion, or just standing on top of a mountain and just taking in the beauty of the view and the wind and the sky and the strength that's beneath you and all of these things. But there's also going to be moments of excruciating pain, of loss and of grief and betrayal and separation, and there's going to be all these shifts and changes, and life is going to be so bittersweet to the extreme sometimes that it can be overwhelming. You can find yourself sort of shut down along the way, overwhelmed on your path, because I've experienced this before I started working with Lady Slipper. The emotions required to be felt in this moment are paralyzing. Like, I can't keep moving. I literally can't move. I need something to break this spell and get me going again. And so this is what's so lovely about Lady Slipper is on your path, on your journey, you can feel it. You can feel all the feels. You can feel all the feelings. You can feel all the ups. You can feel all the downs. You can feel all the love. You can feel all the loss. You can feel all the sadness, all the happiness, all the grief, all the excitement, all the this, all the that, all the things. You can feel it and keep going. You can feel it and you can keep going. This is incredibly powerful medicine and necessary medicine, because one of the other lovely aspects about Lady Slipper is it's about embodiment, to be in the body, and specifically when those of us who, and really all of us are spiritual beings, and then some of us seem a little more minded and aware that way, to bring these spiritual ideas, to bring this spiritual way of viewing life, this spiritual being into the body, to bring it into the body, to connect spirit and matter, spirit and form. And this is especially good for those that have a spiritual path to walk. And by that I mean we all have a spiritual path to walk, but maybe that's your particular calling, has an element to it, where you're having to walk a spiritual path in this world with what you're teaching or writing or sharing. And it can be really difficult to be grounded in your feet in your shoes walking the path. So this is part of what Lady Slipper helps to do, is to come into the body and take those ideas and desires and ways of thinking and being that are up here and bring them down here. Sort of heaven on earth, to make this manifest here in this place. Okay. So another aspect of Lady Slipper that I think is so important is that as we are feeling these things and we are walking this path, what is happening to us? Well, we're experiencing a lot of vulnerability. We're becoming vulnerable as we begin to open up, and I guess the word would be expose ourselves, reveal ourselves. We're becoming vulnerable. So here's this Lady Slipper that's taken years to come up, years to show herself, and when she does it with that flash of pink or that pop of yellow, in that moment she's vulnerable. She's vulnerable to someone coming by that doesn't appreciate her, that doesn't know her, that doesn't understand, and just plucking her, picking her. She's gone, you know? She's she's being vulnerable. She's one of these spring ephemerals, which I mentioned earlier. Asia Suler, a link will be down below, mentions in her article about the spring ephemerals, where their medicine is that of vulnerability. They pop up before the leaves are on the trees, and when there could be a frost and it's not quite spring yet, and they just give it a go. They just say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to bloom. I'm going to be. And there's not all this protection yet, and there's not all this guarantee of how the weather's going to be, but I'm here and I'm going to do it. And there's this raw, that's a really good word for a lot of the spring ephemerals, especially Lady Slipper. There's a raw vulnerability there for them. And that's what happens when we start walking our path in the world, when we start embodying who we are in a spiritual way, when we start to bloom and reveal ourselves, we are becoming vulnerable. And this is really scary for a lot of us. And sometimes we also connect being vulnerable with being soft or weak. But I have to ask you, have you ever touched a lady slipper? Have you ever touched her petals? So I was with quite a few pink lady slippers a few years ago, and I just asked them, like, do you mind if I touch you? Because it feels really intimate, because it really is what I see as the most intimate places of us. This is our sacred space. This is the place where we come together with our partners in physical, emotional, spiritual unity. So I said to her, is it okay? Do you mind if I touch you? And she said yes. She invited. So I was very careful, and so I just began to touch her. And if you look with the lady slipper, they're folded in, but then there's like a little opening, so I just sort of very carefully, opened, look, see, taking care along the way to honor her and respect her. And I had this thought while I was doing that. She is really strong, because I was thinking, I want to take care, because I don't want to damage her petals. I don't want to tear her petals. I want to be careful. I want to have her remain whole. And she was so strong. Like, to have harmed her physically in any way, I would have had to have been, quite rough and rude. And so this combination is there with Lady Slipper of vulnerability and strength. Vulnerability and strength. So as you're working with Lady Slipper and as you're walking your path, you are becoming more vulnerable, but you're also becoming much stronger. And you're also realizing that there is a strength in your vulnerability. There is a strength in beginning to show yourself, to sort of out yourself, to be visible, to choose to bloom. There is also a strength in that. And it's so very lovely in that way, that it shows us how these two ways of being can come together that we so often consider opposites, but that are ways that are so required, two ways of being that are required really to come together if we're going to walk our path, if we're going to wear these shoes, if we're going to, in my world, like, become a big girl now. So one other aspect before I finish up with Lady Slipper medicine is there's no way that you can't see her and not think of fairies or being playful. She's very playful. She's got all of this really deep medicine that can touch on some of our deepest, rawest wounds. And yet she's playful, and she's a plant that is connected to the fairies, and so she can bring this element into your life of the unseen, of the elementals, of fairies, of play, of innocence. She can bring these things in, and it's just amazing to me that she can be as sensual as she is and as innocent as she is, and never once contradict herself. She's just this beautiful, I don't know, just this beautiful embodiment of vital sensual, joyful, loving wholeness. So if you begin to work with Lady Slipper, which I would highly recommend, I would work with her as an essence though, and I will put some links below of where you can find a Lady Slipper essence created by individuals who honor her and love her. I know when I've made a Lady Slipper essence, no cutting of the flower. I sort of piled up some books and I put like this little bowl of water on top so she could just touch her little foot down into the water and then just left her for a time to sort of cool her feet in that little pool that I had given to her, and made an essence, in that way. So I'll put a link below. But she will help you walk your path. She will help you slip on the shoes. She will help the shoes to fit. She will help you decide that this isn't presumptuous. I am this. These are my shoes. This is my path. And she may even help you decide, I am big enough, to the point where you're even big enough for shoes larger than you thought you were able to wear and handle. There's help with her along the way for feeling everything along the way. The ups and the downs, what we would say, the good and the bad. All of the wounds that need healing, the trauma that's there, especially sexual trauma, you can feel it. You can do it. You can open up. Your nervous system can come back online. It can heal. Your heart can open. You can be sensual. She brings all this back. She wakes you up, teaching you how to be strong, how to be vulnerable, how it's okay if it takes time, all of these things, how to bring the spirit into matter, really just how to be you. She's one of the primary plants that I offer in my class, Swan Dive, which is an online immersion. I've taught it in the past. It's pre-recorded now and people can move through it, but she's one of the primary plants that I offer for becoming who you are, discovering your essence, and then embodying your essence. So to wind this up, because I don't want to keep you too much longer, what's extraordinary to me about this plant and its own connection to myself practically is that 8 years ago in 2013, I was finishing my classes with Teresa. I was on the end of finishing my classes with Matt. Lady Slipper was presenting herself. I wasn't so sure that I could call myself an herbalist or walk that path, and then here I am 8 years later. I don't have difficulty calling myself an herbalist now because it seems too big. I have difficulty calling myself an herbalist now because it seems too small, because the world's opened up so much more than I ever expected it to. And I've taught classes, and I've done consultations, and I've created the podcast, and all of these things have happened, and now here I am on the other side of things. And guess who's showing up in my life again? Matthew Wood, 8 years later. All these years later, this last year I had the opportunity to teach with him through his Institute of Herbalism, and we shared space, sharing holly and bat medicine and bear medicine through the animal retreat weekend, which was so beautiful and lovely. And it's just extraordinary to me that here I am 8 years later, just like it's written in the stars, with plant medicine, coming down this way, teaching with Matt again, and then beginning to create through the Institute of Herbalism that he and Tara and John have created more classes. More classes with them on plant attunement and plant communication, and presenting plants in the way that I enjoy presenting them. Plants for forgiveness, plants for anger, for transition, speaking about them in a plant spirit medicine way. Isn't that amazing? It's like Lady Slipper all these years, even when I wasn't taking the essence all the time. That's the amazing thing, is once they become your allies, they're your allies. And even when you're distracted or busy, they're with you, and they're working, and they're tending your path, and they're saying to your spirit and soul, come on, come on, come this way, come on, come on, come this way. And you find yourself becoming. And it's really beautiful, and it's really lovely. And I'm just hoping all of this helps you know there is a path for you. And there is a companion and even many companions for your path so that you can walk it. And it is taking you somewhere. And you do have a story that's written and a story that you're writing, and you are going somewhere, and there is a destination, and the shoe does fit. And I say this and can sound so naive, but if you know some of my story, maybe it will matter to you. There there can be there can be a happy ending. You know, there can be light at the end of the tunnel. There can be another side. There can be a new beginning. There can be wholeness. There can be beauty. There can be magic. Okay, I'll leave it there. I hope this has been helpful for you. Check out the links below for the articles and the people and the essences, and even some information there about the Swan Dive class I've offered in the past, and the plant medicine virtual residency that's getting ready to begin. Like, all sorts of plant medicine underneath to help you slip into those shoes that belong to you. Okay, bye-bye.